Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time in the Quantum Leap Business Show, going around the world to small business owners globally, giving them insights, inspiration and ideas on how to run their businesses with a better outcome, better outlook. And it is my great pleasure to welcome to the show today, Rob Goddard. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Yeah, delighted to have this fireside chat with you.
That's excellent. Rob, you've had a very interesting life. For those that haven't run into you, how did you get into selling of businesses that, people will be a little hot topic that a lot of people will align to?
For sure, yeah. I'm by complete accident. It's the truth of it. I was actually approached by the owners of an M&A firm back in 2002. I come from a banking background originally, so it's not a massive leap in financial services. And they said, how would you like to grow our £1.5 million turnover business? I knew nothing about mergers and acquisitions. They wanted me to be GM. So I jumped over from one company to another, and I took it in 7 years to something turning over just over 15 mil. Nice. Yeah. Do you know what? It was a great apprenticeship, John. Those 7 years, a cracking opportunity. And I learnt a different industry and got paid at the same time. Happy days. Yeah.
Happy days. Rob, you've got a number of interesting NED roles, non-executive director roles. How do you help those businesses? Have you got any examples?
Yeah, I mean, there tends to be a common thread, which is I end up being a critical friend to the owner or the owners, and asking the questions or posing the questions that they really don't want to be asked.
Or held
they know they
accountable
should
for.
be.
Yeah.
They know it's good for them. And you know what it's like, Johnny. You can pose the question and they kind of know the answer, but they need someone alongside that cares about what they're doing and where they want to be. That can ask those difficult questions, examine it, and come up with a way forward. So that tends to cover most of the NED roles that I've been involved with over the last 15 years.
Yeah, but there's been some wide variety of different types of businesses. So the advice that you bring, is there some common threads in all of that?
Yeah, I found that around 80% of good business practice is uniform, it's universal, regardless of country, regardless of industry and people. I mean, some business owners believe they're very special, and their business is very special, and they're in a special industry doing special things. And I've got to say, after 15 years of doing this and working cross industries, no, generally there are common things that we get wrong, and there are common things that really work well regardless of sector and size.
Yeah, that probably leads us into a good question then. What are the 3 or 4 things that people cock up and to their peril of their pocket by selling their business?
Well, number one, they paint themselves into a corner. I call it the golden prison. Often with founders, one solopreneur, one-man bands, they like really being a legend in their own lunchtime. And whilst they might take on staff over a period of time, they really are at the center of their own universe. And that's fine if you want to keep a business forever until you stop breathing.
Yep.
Because most business owners do want to sell and crystallize that investment. And that situation is a real barrier to selling, because the one thing a buyer isn't buying is the current owner.
Yep.
So that is a typical one. Not upskilling, delegating, and allowing the team to run the business day to day. That is a common thing that I come across. Number 2, I found that 90% of business owners don't know their numbers, basic financial. They can't communicate them. When I ask them for their profit before tax, they give me turnover.
Yep.
when I ask about conversion rates, they glaze over quite often. You know, it's amazing. And some of these businesses are successful. They almost blunder into it to encapsulate a phrase that you've used, John.
Yes.
But how much better could it be? How much bigger could that business be? So not knowing the numbers is number two, and that causes a problem when you have something like a pandemic maybe comes, or a recession, or the two together. It separates the wheat from the chaff, and so knowing your numbers. I don't mean being an accountant, because you know we've all got a life to lead, and it isn't counting the beans, but it is actually knowing the key numbers that drive the business. Yep. And looking ahead. So that's number two. Number three is the process really of knowing who to hire and who to fire. You know, be slow to hire and quick to fire.
Yep.
And I've learned that through my own cost, really, over the last 40 years of being in business, both in my own and working for other people. It is all too easy to keep hold of people that are not performing and not contributing to the business. And it sometimes you just need to have you need to make the judgment call for the benefit of the business. So there's three top tips.
And, you know, I can certainly relate to that, and I'm sure that other people can. You know, you agonize over letting someone go if they're not performing, and they make the second and third and 28th mistake, and you keep hold of them, and then you finally let them go. And then you think to yourself, bloody hell, why didn't I do that, you know, a year and 2 years ago?
I know. I guess because we're human and not robots, right, John?
Yes.
You know, we put ourselves often in the position of the other person, and actually it's doing them no good. It's doing your business no good. They're no good. And it's a very sad situation.
Yeah.
And maybe letting them move on to something that they're more suited to is a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. There's and it's interesting when you do change. I just spoke to Jared Yellen and interviewed him for the show, and Jared's a really young guy, 35 and a go-getter, and he's funding 10,000 tech startups, and he shared pretty much exactly those sentiments. So it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Rob, what's your favourite business exit and that you've been involved in, and why was it?
It's a really good question, because I've had well over 300 successful exits over the last 20 years, including my own this year.
Yep.
I guess the first one, when I left the comfort of running this M&A business that I was headhunted into, and I started out on my own in 2009, it was only me with a website, some business cards and a smile. And my first client that I took on was the first one that I sold, and I did it as Rob Goddard, even though I had it. And that means so much to me, because someone trusted me. Okay, I had some experience in the industry, but the company had only existed a few months, and they started paying me a good retainer in order to sell their treasured possessions. So that means the most to me. Yep. And I guess I'm extending your question. The second most favorite one was my own.
Yes.
The first and the last, the alpha and the omega, some would say.
Yep. Excellent. Now, Rob, you talk about a business's magic number and how can someone hit that. Can you just elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, I've had 20 years of selling businesses. Always, I've had this this dance routine with with potential clients that are looking to sell their business. We want to get onto the subject of valuation, which is obviously it's an art rather than a science, despite what some corporate finance and accountants might tell you. It's an art. I ask them what their magic number is, and I do it playfully because I want to see how they respond. And they usually try and value their business today. And I have to interrupt them and say, no, I don't want you to value your business. I've already done that myself because I've looked at your numbers. I want to know, what is the capital sum that you're looking to build and sell that business for, so you can finish one chapter in your life and start a new one. That's the magic number. And that's your number, not an accountant's number, not something that you can look up, and it's not a number I can come up with as an intermediary in this industry. So it's getting the business owners to look at it differently, which is, what do I need the business to be worth? And that's a very different question quite often. So you usually get the price aspirationally they want, and then when you look at 3 years accounts and this year's projections, and maybe next year's there's a gap.
Yep.
And that's the gap I've been in for 20 years with business owners.
I watched an episode of Dragon's Den just for something to do the other day, and there's a guy came on selling baby products, and he wanted a £75,000 investment for 3% of his business, and his last year's turnover was 34,000. You can imagine what the Dragon said.
Trouble is that they're not unique, are they, on Dragon's Den? There's a whole trail of that over the years. Yeah.
So, Rob, people sell their businesses in many ways, whether that's a trade sale or perhaps a listing on a stock exchange or to an unrelated party that's looking to build a client base and sees you as a target. So sometimes a lot of business sales come from the most unlikely of sources. Can you just expand on, if someone out there looking to sell their business, how should they open their eyes to opportunity?
Yeah, that's a very good expression you just used there, John, about opening their eyes. I find that the majority of people looking to sell a business that I've met are quite blinkered. They believe they know who's going to buy their business. And so part of the initial job is to get them to think wider. They often think about competitors, which is an obvious place to start and a natural place to start. But of course, when you start talking about confidentiality, they get a bit of cold about talking to their direct competitors that they're up for sale.
Yep.
Part of the education of business owners is to look at complementary markets. So by that, I mean a business that doesn't sell what they sell, products and services, but does sell to a similar client base. That's complementary. So by acquiring their business, this person's business, they're expanding their offering. And of course, you get the benefit of two businesses becoming one. I also talked to them about investors, venture capitalists, private equity, family offices, which sometimes business owners have heard about but don't really know a lot about. Probably in the negative, particularly with private equity and vulture capitalists, as I've been told. But actually, again, it's an education process to say, well, these are people with surplus funds. They want to back businesses, and often they'll back a trading business to buy out another company. So if you're looking to sell your business, one of the areas you need to fish in are the investors, private equity, VCs, and family offices. There is another community of people which are just investors with some cash. But they tend to come at the bottom of the pile, really, because you don't just want someone with money. You want something that you want a buyer, an acquirer that can offer more than money. So it's not one to be excluded, private investors, but it's one to treat with care. I found that the highest prices that have been paid over the last 20 years I've been doing this tend to come from, quite often, majority come from a trading business buying another trading business, but with some private equity or VC money in the background.
Interesting. Rob, I talk about starting with the end in mind and then working your way backwards. Does that help in selling a business?
Absolutely. And it links in with the magic number that we've just talked about. And it's something that most business owners never do. They tend to fall into running a business rather than it be some sort of plan, a big plan in their life. And so I like starting at the end point. What do you want to do life after sale? Imagine a life where you're not running a 30-employee company and getting a sense of purpose and significance. What are you going to do? Where are you going to be? And how are you going to enjoy life? How are you going to find that significance and purpose and identity in life after you've sold your company? And that tends to be quite a creative conversation with the business owner. They never thought about it that way. And you're right, because once you know how much you're looking to sell the business for, because you know what you want to go on and do, then you can work it back as to, right, what have I got to do over the next few years in order to exceed that magic number? So you're absolutely right. Most business owners, of course, never have that mindset. Conversely, VCs and private equity, they're the reverse. because even before they've sunk money into a business acquisition, they've worked out their exit and when,
Yep.
and how much ideally for. So you've got professional investors and organizations, and then entrepreneurs. They're very different mindsets.
Yep. We've been speaking so far about perhaps slightly larger businesses, and I know that's the area you play in, where the vast majority of businesses in the UK, as indeed they are globally, are one-man bands. In fact, I think it's over 80% of all businesses are one-person operations. So how does a one-person operation, where does that change in the mindset of if you're just running a lifestyle type of business? How do you get out of that if you want to, and avoid what I call business prison, which is, you know, you end up becoming a slave to your business? Exactly.
Yeah. Candidly, to your audience, John, don't. You're highly unlikely to sell it, and certainly don't pay anyone to try and sell your one-man band. What you've created is a job, not a business. Because as soon as you stop breathing or you leave the company, which hopefully it will be the latter, there is no business, because it all sits with the owner. So I don't touch at all, and I've never touched those solopreneur smaller businesses. I've encouraged them to grow it and maybe collaborate with other businesses to help them scale, but it's not a business, it's a job. So you are right in the numbers. 80% are one person owned. Another statistic on the back of it is 97% of businesses turn over less than £500,000 in the UK. So really, it's like a port decanter. It's very narrow at the top and it broadens out. So if you're listening to this and turning over more than £500,000, you're in the top 3% of companies in the UK.
Yep. So
give yourself a pat on the back. And of course, less than 1% turnover more than 5 mil. So it's very hard. I learned the hard way not to touch really small businesses because they don't sell most of the time. And I don't like to take money from people if I don't think I'm going to sell the business. I want to sleep at night.
100%, and good advice. Rob, if anybody's looking for investment, you know, there are probably two stages in a business. They're either started employing people, so they've got that little next stage, and then they all of a sudden they want to scale their business, and then that, you know, from about £500,000 on in turnover. What are, if they're looking for investment, what's a couple of, you know, quick wins that people can implement in strategies in order to attract investment into the business in whatever shape they're looking to do that?
The first one, because I'm an investor myself, having sold my business, I've got surplus cash. And not only do I like to work as an NED, sometimes I like to sink money into that business that I'm working with as well. So I'm speaking from personal experience. Pitch decks, some are very good. Most of them are pretty poor, mediocre at best. And it's because the business owner has tried it themselves, or got their friend down the pub to draw one up on PowerPoint. They're pretty poor. And of course, that is how an investor, potential investor, is going to judge. It's a bit like a CV, isn't it?
Yep.
And I get several pitch decks a day via LinkedIn, a day.
Yep.
And they're not paying me to read through their documents either. So also if it's paid work. So I think get someone who knows what they're doing, both from a graphic design point of view, but more importantly, from creating compelling pitch decks to do it. Don't do it yourself. Supply the information to that individual, but don't do it yourself. I found quite often business owners wax lyrical about the product or the gizmo, the widget that they've invented, and they go on for pages about it, and it bores me.
Yep.
What I want to know as an investor is how can I treble my money in the next 2 to 3 years? That's what I want to read. You know, it's all very nice. You've got to know what the product is, but they're very proud of what they've created. But actually, it's not the point. It's got to be worked, the document, for the reader, not from the person that's sending it. So definitely get someone to provide a compelling pitch deck. Number two, it's linked, is to get someone to do the approach work to investors rather than you. Outsource it. Get someone who's got a good track record, got the network in finding relevant, well-funded investors to bring them to the table. Then you can take over. But I find doing it yourself, DIY, I suppose I could learn dentistry off YouTube. And some business owners learn a lot of things from YouTube, like creating pitch decks and where to find an investor. But I would outsource both of those. Then it frees you up to continue running your business. And that's crucial. You don't want the numbers to dip because you're focused elsewhere. But also it's just a better job when you get people who are trained and qualified and experienced to do those two functions.
Yep. And some great advice. I've run through personally some instances where I was selling quite a larger business, an 8-figure sum business. And you'd got to the point where we'd almost got it sold. But for the last 12 months, we took our foot off the pedal. And you mentally have left the building. And that's a massive mistake. So
I get that.
It certainly resonates with me. Rob, what are your thoughts on crowdfunding?
It's not a space, to be honest, I've got involved with. I'm aware of it, but I've had no involvement. I think it's a thing. What's put me off of it personally, working in that space, is the more shareholders and investors you have in a business, the more propensity there is for confusion.
Yeah. Too many cooks spoil the broth.
I've always said that if the more shareholders you have, there's a disproportionate ratio to the likelihood of selling your business. But I do recognize crowdfunding has a place in certain industries for people to raise much needed capital for growth. But I don't have a strong opinion on it because I've not worked in that sector. Okay.
All right. Thanks. Thanks for your honesty. I just thought I'd throw that one in. You mentioned briefly about vulture capitalists, and I've had some first-hand experience dealing with them through 9/11, where I been dealing with a guy for nearly 2 years, and then after 9/11, I got one sentence on a fax machine back in the day that the deal was off because of what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
But there are good VCs and there are bad VCs. What's just a couple of quick things, what's good and what's bad to look out for?
Yeah, it's a good point. Chemistry is one. I know it's a soft issue, but it's a really important one because they're going to be part of your business. So you got to get on with them. You got to like each other. Otherwise, it's going to be a very difficult few years. Make sure they are a VC or a private equity, because some people purport to have private funds and they don't.
Yep.
They're borrowing the money.
Yep.
From somewhere.
Proof of funding.
Yeah. So if they say they've got a private equity fund, make sure it is.
Yep.
Not just the bank manager has said that they could lend them 100 grand. So have a look. All credible VCs and private equity will have a list of their investments that they've currently got and some of the past ones. Have a look, see if they're relevant to your sector. It does really help if the investor that you're bringing in has got industry experience, because that's part of when I was talking, John, about not just someone with the money, but what else can they bring to the table? That is a key one, because they could open up new markets. They may have a really good black book in that industry of contacts. So definitely find out if they've got industry experience as well as the chemistry, and get them to open up early on without spending months of dancing around handbags as to their valuation of your business. Ask them outright, where do they see the valuation currently and in the future? So have an honest conversation, smoke it out a bit. You can waste a lot of time, not just with investors, but with acquirers. And it could go, I've known some to go on for 2-3 years and they still haven't come up with a price.
Yep.
What's that about?
Yep. No, wise words. So Rob, what about for some of the smaller ones and perhaps startups, is the old FFF formula, friends, family and fools that have got some money floating around? How do you manage expectations when you're getting money from someone that you know?
Yeah, well, the cheapest money to borrow is your own, of course, and so, or the company's. Um, I've always, it's tempting, isn't it, to go to people that you know, friends, family. I've steered away from that. I've wanted to do it on a proper business commercial setting because I don't want to fall out with family and good friends.
Yep.
Although they'd probably be the first people to try and help you. But there's plenty of money out there where you don't have to do the FFF methodology. There are plenty of people there with cash lurking in their bank accounts and they want to make it work, particularly with inflation at such a low interest rates at such a low level for the last 20 years. So my advice personally is to avoid going to the people that you know well, because you want to keep the relationship, and do it on a commercial footing. But it is hard, and I do a lot of events, speak at a lot of events, and I get people coming up. You're going to Excel shortly, I know, with the business show, and I've done that for 7-8 years. I often have people coming up saying, I've got a full-time job on a salary, but I've got this great business idea and I want to become self-employed. And I say, don't. Do it as a side hustle first. Don't give up the well-paid salary job with all the perks and less stress. But do it in the background. Test if you've got a market for what you want to offer first, even if it's small scale. Then you'll start generating some cash. So maybe you don't need to get external investment. Maybe the business, albeit quite fledgling, is producing its own cash, and do it that way. But if it does need an injection of external cash, at least you can turn around to an investor and say, I've got I've got a debtor book, yep. I've got clients, and I've got client testimonials. What I want to do is get bigger.
Yep.
But I often find that people don't want to do that. They want the instant cup of coffee, don't they? They want the instant return, and they also want everything. They don't. When I've done startups, worked on startups, you do it piece by piece. Whereas if they think someone else is going to write the check, they're going for a really big number because they want everything. They want the Bentley Continental GT company car, drop head, obviously. they want fancy offices with the koi carp in the front with the fountain. So I think start with your own money and actually prove there's a market for what you're going to sell.
Yep, no, wise words for sure. So Rob, it's often said it's hard to soar like an eagle if you're surrounded by turkeys. So how do you surround yourself with great people? I've
been very lucky the last 20 years.
Is it the harder you work, the luckier you got, though?
I've made mistakes. A few. It sounds like a song, doesn't it? Intro to a song. I've made mistakes. Yeah. Generally, people that are aligned with what you're trying to do, there may be a different personality, but they're very much aligned in certain areas. So there's people that I've known for many, many years and acted as pseudo mentors, really, as well as mentors. I think you be very quick to just keep a small circle of people around you. There'll always be acquaintances in those. It's like an onion, isn't it? I don't spend a lot of time in those areas because I found that you can waste a lot of time with a lot of people having lots of cups of coffee in Starbucks or other good coffee shops.
Yep.
And it doesn't go anywhere. So what I do now, when someone approaches me, it's usually via LinkedIn, and several times a week, they want to chat. Well, I want to find out, whether they've read my profile. So I'd say, sure. What would you like to talk about specifically? Because you can waste a lot of time with people that really you're not going to engage with because you're just not connected there, and also you got to like them. So I find there's quite a bit of pre-qualification. I used to, when I first started in business, I used to love going for cups of coffee because someone wanted to give me their time, but all they wanted to do really was pitch to me.
Yep. Or suck your brain, one or the other.
Yeah, free consultancy. So now on my LinkedIn profile, I have all my prices. So I'm even telling people how much I charge before they've even made contact. Yep. No, I think it's a skill, isn't it? You learn the sort of people that are healthy, positive, there are, and can build you up, and you can do the same for them. And then there's others that just absorb energy from you. And I have to say, I avoid that. I want to stick with positive, like-minded people. It doesn't mean to say we share the same opinion, but we have the same sort of view about life, which is glass half full.
Yep. Yeah. Otherwise, the other ones become toxic, or what I call oxygen thieves.
Exactly.
So
you're right. So I do nip the free consultancy in the bud. I call it out when I start to see it come across in an email.
Yep. Rob, there's since COVID, there's been a lot of talk about changes in the world and the way we do things, and all this online, and the mental health issues, and I've seen it firsthand. How do you deal with stress, burnout, mental health, and how does that play a part in the sale of a business, either as the owner, the staff, the concept? How do you mitigate those building and more frequent occurrences?
You're right. Yeah, it's a really good point. It's often underestimated by a business owner when they're looking ahead at an exit plan. They don't really give much attention to the impact it's going to have on them. They're focused on the money, and which I understand. But it's when you've sold your business, you've made yourself redundant from your own company. Now what you're going to do? You're not a legend in your own lunchtime. You might have cash, but it's not about the money in the bank account. It's about significance and purpose in life. And I know for myself, an identity, you have to refine your identity, because often as business owners, we find it in the company that we set up and grow. Well, what are you going to do now?
Yep.
So it is anyone that says selling a business is easy and smooth is lying. It isn't. I've had 360 successful transactions. All of them have had bumps in the road. It just depends whether you have lots of bumps or just a couple, but none of them go smoothly, because there's too many moving parts in a business sale. And I know that from your own experience, John. There's too much that can go wrong, and it is very stressful. You're trying to sell the business, think about the new life that you might have, and then you've got to run the company and make sure the numbers don't go south.
Yep.
So it is highly stressful, and I encourage business owners not to underestimate it, particularly when you're sitting down with potential buyers for your business and they call your baby ugly.
Yeah, yeah, you can tend to take offence sometimes at that.
Yeah, and then there's the other thing. Most businesses taken to market don't sell in this country. In fact, in other countries that I've worked in, doing the same thing. It's not something that's talked about by M&A brokers and corporate finance and M&A advisors. It's lucky to be 1 in 5 sell. Okay. And it's a salutary lesson, really. We ought to know that. The odds are stacked against us in selling a business unless you pick the right advisor. But the national average is 1 in 5.
Yep.
So knowing that it's not a foregone conclusion that you'll sell your business, I encourage business owners to think about, right, a contingency plan B.
Yep.
If it doesn't sell, what's going to be the impact on you? How are you going to feel about that? What is your plan B? What will you do if it doesn't sell, or doesn't sell at the right price, and you decide to not take the offer? So I think it's if I wrap that up, it's all about thinking about the person. They are a human being. It's not a financial transaction in itself. It's about someone's life and what they're going to go on to do next. So it's about the person more than it is about anything else.
Yeah. And that just leads me to thought, I've been heavily involved in the cricket arena, as people may or may not know, at reasonable level. And, one of the things that I've seen is ex-elite cricketers, when they retire, some of them struggle badly because they've moved away from the professional sporting environment. Yeah. They then wake up one morning and they haven't got the regiment and the schedules and the coaches and everybody, the advisors around them. And that'd be pretty much like when you sell a business. All of a sudden you wake up and think, oh my God, I don't have to go to work today. Are there any quick things there on, have you made any observations on what would one thing be that you could do if you're in that situation?
Definitely. Well, personal experience, I started doing one-to-one mentoring and coaching 2 years before I sold my business. I did it as alongside. to help business owners grow their business and prepare for an exit, which is complementary to my main business before I sold it. So it's actually having your life after sale, start it while you've still got your business. Do it. And if you've delegated and upskilled to your team and they're running it day to day and not you as the owner, you should have some time in your diary, you should have some bandwidth in order to do something else. So I did one-to-one mentoring. I also got involved with a couple of charities, a cancer charity locally, and also an orphanage in Albania, which is where my life might end up when I retire one day, John.
Yeah, I see you've got a travel business out there. So.
Yeah. I started it 3 weeks before first lockdown.
Great timing.
Oh, brilliant timing. But yeah, we were able in the summer. We were able to do sort of rental of apartments and charter boats. But yeah, so yeah. Look, it happens to the best of us, doesn't it? What can you do?
Mike Tyson once said, "Everybody's got a plan until you get a smack in the face."
That's true. That's true. So definitely have your future life running alongside your current life. You can do that. Yep. You can do that.
Great tip. Rob, you've got an interesting looking book sitting there behind you. Just share some the content of that.
Well, that's my several hundred transactions that I've had the privilege of working with. And I've distilled into a very thin book, the do's and don'ts. It's called The 11 Commandments and the 7 Cardinal Sins of Selling a Business. Long title, thin book. There are 11 principles for selling a business for a premium price. Any idiot can sell a business at a discounted price, but it's selling for a premium. 11 things you must do. And then there's 7 cardinal sins, 7 things you avoid like the plague, unless you want to sell at a low price and get fleeced.
There you go. So just give me that title again, Rob.
It's the 11 Commandments and the 7 Cardinal Sins of Selling a Business. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me on LinkedIn, DM me on LinkedIn or an email, then I'll send them a free copy, an ebook, if they're living overseas.
Excellent. Rob, really appreciate your time today to spend with us. And I'm sure if there's anybody there thinking of selling a business and it's in the field that you look after, what would be, Rob, the minimum sort of value that you'd be wanting to get involved with to suit your profile?
Really good question. Anything above 5 million turnover, industry agnostic. For businesses under 5 million, I'd still be interested in having a conversation, because it's not all about turnover. It might be that they have a high net margin, or they might have intellectual property. So they might be a 3 million turnover business, but it could be worth 10 million, 20 million pounds. So it's still worth getting in touch with me. But there's just, since you've asked the question, it's worth giving that sort of typical lower threshold.
Yep. Rob Goddard, it's been our pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm sure people will take away and chew on some of the interesting insights that you've shared with us. So thank you very much. We appreciate the time and input that you've put in today.
My pleasure, John. Really good. And hopefully people out there will get something, take away a gem for themselves. Thanks, John.